It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Her life ended after brutal abuse. Sara Sharif's killers are found guilty of her murder. Her father and stepmother will be sentenced next week. But now questions over the missed opportunities to save Sara's life.
Also tonight on Sky News at 10, we're live in the Syrian capital Damascus. A glimpse into the life of a dictator. Rebel soldiers take Sky News inside the Assad abandoned family home. The tomb of Assad's father is set on fire as fighting continues across this country. And I see the torture chambers of the Sednaya prison, a symbol of the regime's oppression.
Plus, tractors descend on Westminster. Farmers leave the countryside for the cities as the farming union says it can't rule out strikes and food shortages. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. She was 10 and she was murdered by her father. Sara Sharif was hooded, tied up and beaten with a cricket bat, enduring more than 2 years of abuse. Today, a court found her father, Ufan Sharif, and her stepmother, Benash Batul, guilty of murder. Her uncle, Faisal Malik, was cleared of her murder but found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. The focus now turns to why Sara was put back in the custody of her family after being taken into care, and if there were missed opportunities to protect her. In a moment, we'll hear from people who work in children's services. But our first report tonight comes from Sky's Sabah Chowdhury.
Sara Sharif was a spirited child who loved to sing and play her guitar. But last summer, everything changed.
I killed my daughter. I killed my daughter.
She was murdered aged 10.
I'm a cruel father.
Sara Sharif was subjected to a campaign of abuse at the hands of her father, Ufan Sharif, who was found guilty of her murder. Her stepmum, Benash Batul, also found guilty of murder. Sara's uncle, Faisal Malik, was found guilty of causing or allowing her death.
All three defendants have only ever sought to preserve their own interests throughout this investigation and have shown no remorse for their truly dreadful behaviour.
Benash Batul burst into tears when she heard the verdict. She denied any fault throughout the trial. Sara's father had accepted full responsibility, initially in a confession to police while on the run in Pakistan.
Take a deep breath and tell me what's happened.
I cannot. I physically punished my daughter and she died.
Your daughter has died?
I killed my daughter. I killed my daughter.
How have you killed your daughter?
I beat her up. It wasn't my intention to kill her, but I beat her up too much.
It was here at home in Woking where Sara should have felt safest that she was subjected to sustained cruelty, being battered with a cricket bat and pole, an iron to her buttocks, being restrained with masking tape, being hooded, strangled and bitten. Details Ava's mum is shielding from her daughter, who started Year 7 this year without her friend.
She was very bubbly, she was very kind, she was never shy. She always used to be in like a pretend fashion show, and it was just really nice to watch.
But not all memories are happy. Ava says Sara once came to school covered in bruises.
She told me she fell off her bike, but I just knew that's not something that you would fall off your bike.
Prosecutors say Sara was homeschooled and covered up to hide her injuries.
Police, hello, anyone in?
But by the time police arrived at the family home, it was too late. Sara's body was found alone on a bunk bed with this note from her dad. "I love you, Sara," it read. "I'm running away because I am scared." The family left for Pakistan the day after Sara died. Shortly afterwards, an international manhunt was in full swing. Sky News made contact with them and was sent this video used as evidence at trial.
We are willing to cooperate with the UK authorities and fight our case in court.
After 35 days, they did just that. Today, Sara's mother, Olga Sharif, left this tribute to her daughter. My dear Sara, I ask God to please take care of my little girl. She was taken too soon. Sara had beautiful brown eyes and an angelic voice. Sara's smile could brighten up the darkest room. Justice for Sara is now within reach. Next, the sentencing and the inevitable question. Why did nobody stop her abuse before it was too late? Sabah Chowdhury, Sky News at the Old Bailey.
Well, the trial at the Old Bailey heard how again and again Surrey County Council's children's services were made aware of concerns. Now, a leading child protection specialist has told Sky News that the case shines a light on the level of demand there is on the system. Sky's social affairs correspondent Becky Johnson reports.
From the moment she was born, Sara Sharif was known to social services. Throughout her life, there were times they could have intervened and opportunities missed.
Quite clearly, the system failed her because she tragically died at a very, very young age, where all the indications are that it could have been averted.
There have been previous allegations of abuse against both her parents. At birth in 2013, she was made the subject of a child protection plan. In 2014, her parents separated and Sara went into foster care. The following year, she returned to her father, then her mother, as each parent accused the other of abuse. Then, in 2019, the family court awarded custody to her father. In March 2023, her school made a referral to social services, but social workers closed the case after 6 days. Weeks later, her father withdrew her from school. That August, she died. There are many questions for Surrey Social Services. Key among them, why, when Sara's school contacted them about concerning bruises on her face just months before her death, did they not do more? That was their chance to remove her from danger, but they didn't. Instead, they contacted her father, ran some checks, then closed the case. Inexplicably, Sara's history of vulnerability didn't appear to set alarm bells ringing. So why not?
When practitioners are being faced with 40, 50, 60 cases a day, they are naturally going to be prioritising.
But shouldn't a child with Sara's history have been top priority?
Totally agree, but everything's relative. So the difficulty is, how many other children at that time was that service responding to?
Sara had begun wearing the hijab in the year she died. It's now suspected that was to hide bruises.
When I think of Sara, my immediate image of her is her smile.
For Sara's friends and teachers, her loss has been devastating.
I don't think I've ever felt such sadness. And I think I say that on behalf of all the staff and the community. I think the shock was just immense.
Sara died the year after a national review examined failings by social services in Solihull and Bradford to protect murdered children Arthur Labignio Hughes and Star Hobson. Star's family are horrified that lessons still aren't being learned.
How can this still keep on happening?
It's been 4 years since we lost Star, and I don't even want to think about the number of children that have lost their lives in that 4 years.
There'll now be a safeguarding review into Sara's death. The manager responsible for Surrey Social Services said, "We are resolute in our commitment to protecting children and we're determined to play a full and active part in the forthcoming review." It's too late for Sara, yet another vulnerable child dead, despite repeated warnings to the authorities that she could be at risk. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Surrey.
Well, Becky is here with me now. Sentencing to come then, Becky, but those questions that you raised there need answers about how yet another child, known to authorities, came to harm.
Yeah, sadly, this is not the first time we've sat here talking about a devastating case like this. And as in previous cases, there will now be an independent safeguarding review and people are saying lessons will be learned. But tonight,
The Children's Commissioner has said that is simply no longer enough. She's calling on the government to step in, and she wants to see certain concrete measures. So she wants better data sharing so that when a social services referral is made about a child with a history like Sara's, it should set alarm bells immediately ringing. She would like to see no child at risk of abuse allowed to be homeschooled, as Sara was in the final months of her life. And she would also like to see the government put proper funding into children's social care. But look, we've had reviews about that as well. 2 years ago, a landmark review said in order to fix children's social care, there would need to be a programme of complete reform costing £2.6 billion. The reality is a tiny fraction of that has been spent since. That won't be spent. And so the truth is, very sadly, we have a child protection system in this country where vulnerable children will slip through the net with the devastating consequences, as we've seen, with the loss of Sara Sharif's life.
Becky, thank you.
Good evening from Damascus, the capital of Syria. I'm Yalda Hakim. Well, since the fall of the Assad regime, we've been given an extraordinary and sometimes terrifying look into the life of the people who lived under its rule. And now we can show you how Bashar al-Assad and his family lived. Sky News was given access to his home. Signs of luxury littered the floor, including evidence of millions stashed in foreign bank accounts. It's now abandoned. Contrast that with the torture chambers of the notorious Sednaya prison, described as the slaughterhouse, where today I walked past the cells with a woman still searching for her brother. More on that in a moment. But first, our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn reports from the capital.
Welcome to what the Assad family called home. They had many palaces, but this was their personal residence in Damascus. We were the first to be shown the dictator's private world here. Our rebel guide rifled through Assad family photos, startling glimpses of Syria's tall, gangly tyrant relaxing on holiday, and the life he and his family led before he was wrenched from power.
Looters have completely ransacked this place, but amongst the mess there are some telling details. There's the portrait of Assad there, but on the floor, family details, homework from one of the Assad children, the diary of a wimpy kid, something that the children may have made at school. Also, Assad, the husband, these are certificates of earrings he bought his wife. All the jewellery's been ripped out of their boxes, and amongst those boxes we found these. This was the Assad family home, and here are, it seems, their wedding photographs. So this is the day that Asma, the British-born woman, married Bashar al-Assad, there with her family and his, the happy couple together. Years before their lives would end in flight into exile in Moscow. And here, a photograph of Bashar al-Assad, the young Assad, in the military, and on the back, the dictator's thumbprint.
This was the personal boudoir of Syria's First Lady, where she seems to have kept some of her most treasured belongings. Gifts from her children among a sea of looted luxury. While her husband was orchestrating the murder of hundreds of thousands, his wife was living a life of opulence. Among the chaos, we found documents potentially hugely damning for the Assads. Financial records showing family members have millions stashed away in foreign bank accounts. Our rebel guides had no doubt the Assads have stolen much more.
That's a drop in the ocean. This is the money of all the Syrian people. They've been ruling us for 55 years and just stealing from us and exploiting us. What we want to happen is for these accounts to be frozen and for all the money to go back to the Syrian people. We want it to go back to the original owners. He doesn't own that money. It's not the result of his hard work.
There were more secrets below the house, we were told. A rebel fighter invited us into a tunnel. It stretched deep underground, going on and on.
There's everything you'd need to live underground for a long time in this labyrinth. Bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchens, a huge air filtration system. It's protected and sealed off by these bomb-proof doors. And then through here, a generator section to power the whole place. And then we're told through this passage here, there is a ladder that goes up a long, long way, and they've no idea where it ends.
An entire nuclear and chemical bunker below the house of the man who gassed his own people, while his family lived in protected luxury.
And Dominic will be joining us in a moment to talk more about what he has seen. Well, while there are scenes of jubilation here in Damascus, there is also a sense of trepidation about what comes next. Parts of this country, physically scarred by past conflicts, are now attempting to start a new life. Our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, has been to Homs and sent us this report.
The regime's last stand, and it didn't last long, ended in Homs. The road into the city is littered with military vehicles destroyed or abandoned. A once fearsome checkpoint is empty, the city beyond it is free. In the centre of town, where an enormous statue of Assad once dominated, is now a place of celebration and selfies. The regime was powerful in Homs because it destroyed the opposition. Some of the most appalling attacks on civilians happened here. It's a place called Bab el-Amr, and it was the home of the uprising in Homs. Barely a building was left undamaged in a campaign of blanket bombing and targeted attacks by the Syrian army in 2012. It's never been rebuilt, but people are returning now, living in the midst of the rubble. People are now on the streets, free of the fear of being arrested, imprisoned or murdered. These scenes of ordinary life just didn't exist in Bab el-Amr until now. At every corner, we were surrounded by people telling us of family members murdered by the regime. It was a constant. And then this. After 14 years in hiding, Ahmed Hassan Naimi, an anti-Assad activist, has just returned home. And this is his family.
I still can't believe it. I'm saying hello to everyone still. I've seen my mother for the first time in 14 years.
I was here when the uprising started. Abu Firas was one of the Free Syrian Army soldiers who protected us. They were just in their 20s then. They showed me round the streets where we took refuge, and in the buildings where they tried to hold off Assad's forces. Their task was impossible against the barrage of rockets.
At that time, I deserted from the army. I was just 22 years old.
So at that time, we used to see FSA soldiers, fighters, but there weren't very many of you, were there? It was quite small.
There were few of us, and even our weapons were limited. There were few of us.
Sunday Times journalist Mary Colvin, French photographer Remy Oklik, Syrian activists and civilians all died here. They called it the media centre. Well, this is the heart of Bab el-Amr and its significance in Homs. It's really where the revolution against Bashar al-Assad started. This building is incredibly significant because it was where activists worked and the media came here from the outside world. It was attacked a lot and all of the neighbourhoods here were attacked. This place, in the end, was hammered so much that everyone left, and they're now only just beginning to return because, of course, the regime has fallen. Homs is free now from Assad's long reign of terror. The future is far from clear, of course, but the present feels very special in Bab el-Amr. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Homs.
Well, it was only on Sunday that the rebels took over this country and Bashar al-Assad and his family fled. And of course, now there are people, journalists, activists, aid workers going through prisons and palaces to try and get a better sense of how the Assad family lived and the treatment of prisoners and those who have been kept in detention. Earlier, you saw our piece there from our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn. Well, Dominic is here with me now. And Dom, you were in one of their family homes. I mean, we've seen the palace earlier in the week. You were there. And now in one of their townhouses.
Yeah, and it was both surreal, rather chilling and creepy, but also very revealing. The Assad sort of illusion they tried to present to the world was that they were modernising reformers. Asma al-Assad, the first wife, 15 years ago, in an interview here, said to me that we're just a pretty ordinary middle-class family. What we saw today in that house was exposes that as a complete lie. It was rammed full, clearly, of very expensive designer goods. Not much left of them, just the boxes they were in, but, you know, jewellery, antiques, luxuries that ordinary Syrians could only dream of having. Yes, there were family photos that might have looked ordinary, except we're seeing Bashar al-Assad in Speedos, which look pretty creepy. But this was a family with a nuclear bunker in the basement. A family whose father was sending Syrians in their tens of thousands to jails to be tortured to death and to die gruesome deaths in the killing fields of Syria. So it was anything but ordinary. I think the question that Syrians are going to want answered is what those rebels were saying in their Asma al-Assad's bedroom today. Which is what's happened to the money. And the suspicion, of course, is that millions have been salted away. We began to find some documents, bank accounts showing millions of dollars in Lebanese bank accounts held by Assad's family members. The good news is they seem to have escaped in a hurry, and they've left a lot of evidence behind. But I think the process of investigating all this to fully establish quite how the terrible horror of the Assad years was paid for and where that money has gone now, that's begun. And the important thing for Syrians is that money is brought back here and it can start being used to rebuild the country.
Dom, thank you so much for all of your reporting there. Well, Dom mentioned the killing fields of Syria. Today, I went to the notorious Sednaya prison on the outskirts of Damascus. For years, we've heard claims of mass executions taking place there and torture being used on inmates. As we walked through the doors of the prison, we got a window into that horrific backstory. Have a look.
Yes, okay. We entered the prison, stepping over discarded blankets, the stench overpowering. The detainees, those who spoke out against the regime, were tortured, electrocuted, sexually assaulted and buried alive.
Judy, what are you thinking when you see this and to think that your brother was kept here?
It's criminal. I can't believe my brother died here and we didn't know anything about him.
After the rebels opened the doors to the cells, they uncovered brutality of a medieval nature.
And this is the infamous crushing machine. I'm told that people were put into this machine and then they were essentially crushed to death. Sometimes they would bring dead bodies here and crush them to dispose of their bodies. Absolutely horrifying to see this machine here.
This is a nation traumatized by years of brutal dictatorship at the hands of the Assad regime. For now, families continue to search for the lost.
We're still learning about the dark realities of this nation, and I was told this evening that there are dozens of secret prisons across this country that the aid workers, the health workers are still trying to dig through and get access to. I just want to show you these images of more chaos today here in this city and this country. This taken in the Assad family town, the birthplace of the family, where you can see the tomb of Hafez al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad, being set alight. And of course, he was the president of the country from 1971 until he died in the year 2000 when his son Bashar al-Assad took over. So this really is a symbol of the end of 54 years of brutality in this country at the hands of the Assad family. Across this country, we are seeing posters, images being torn apart, ripped down, and now the tomb of Hafez al-Assad burnt as well. We'll be continuing to cover the story of Syrians, their trauma, and how they have come to terms with this new reality, this new dawn in their country. For now, Anna, back to you.
Yalda, thank you. Well, back here, hundreds of the country's farmers brought their tractors to the capital today, urging the government to reconsider plans to introduce inheritance tax on agricultural land. The president of the National Farmers Union has warned that he can't rule out food shortages if farmers go on strike. Sky's business correspondent Gurpreet Nawan has more.
The country has come to town. With a mile-long row of tractors that brought Westminster to a standstill. Farmers are still protesting the government's inheritance tax changes, and they're not going away quietly. They began early on farms like this one in Berkshire.
We can live without electricity, but we cannot live without food. And so much land will be sold off, which will never be farmed anymore.
But it's also about family and heritage.
I'm fighting for the survival of my farm, my daughter's futures. We have all worked very hard to keep this farm. My parents and my uncles were poor in the 70s due to high taxation. And now I'm facing the same thing, same Armageddon.
This row of tractors stretches all the way back to Trafalgar Square. It's clear that the government has underestimated the depth of anger its budget has caused. Over a month after it was unveiled, and protesters from across Britain's rural communities are still descending on Westminster. The Chancellor is holding firm, but the government's efforts to quell the anger are failing. But it's giving it a go.
We put £5 billion into farming over the next 2 years. That's a record number under the budget. Last week alone, £350 million to support farmers in the United Kingdom. In relation to inheritance tax, the vast majority of farmers will be unaffected, despite the fear-mongering of the party opposite.
The farmers aren't buying it.
They don't care what we think. They don't care about what the British public think.
I really don't know what we're going to do, but I have no hope, no faith in this government at all.
Ministers have started preparing for an escalation. The fear is that farmers could go on strike, leading to shortages on the shelves.
I can't rule it out. The public have done absolutely nothing wrong. We absolutely have to have their support, and I really don't want them to get caught in the eye of this storm. So making sure that we don't cut off their supplies and that we keep the public on side is essential to making sure that government have to listen.
Labour's rural problem has reared its head once more. Without a breakthrough, it could soon become everyone's problem. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
An 18-year-old Briton has been sentenced to a year in prison in Dubai for having sex with a British girl who was 17 at the time. Marcus Fakana was arrested by authorities in Dubai after the girl's family reported him having already left the country. The age of consent in the UAE is 18 and strictly enforced. Police have confirmed that dozens of people are now being investigated at the Post Office and Fujitsu over the Horizon IT scandal. 100 officers are now working on the case. Perverting the course of justice and perjury are among the offences under consideration.
At the moment, we've got over 1.5 million documents that we're reviewing. Now, consider that each document contains pages of material. So it's a huge undertaking. Hence, we need a larger team to continue. This is an investigation that's already been running for some time, or for a few years. But now this allows us to take a significant move forward in terms of pace. And we were always tied to the public inquiry, but the scale of it is the sheer number of victims involved. We've got, we think over 3,000 people affected in some way by Horizon in this manner. So it's huge. So we've got to put in a commensurate number of officers to start moving it at pace.
There are questions around human rights, workers' protection, and why Saudi Arabia was the sole bidder to host the 2034 Men's World Cup. Today, FIFA President Gianni Infantino made it official, also confirmed we're the hosts for the 2030 tournament, which will take place across 3 continents to celebrate 100 years of the tournament. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris has the story.
At 2034 in Riyadh, kick-off for the 2034 World Cup party, a show of political and financial power.
Saudi Arabia.
This was a victory engineered for Saudi Arabia by FIFA. A fast-track process without any rival.
Are you ready?
Still presented as a decision for global FAs, but they were left dialing in on Zoom. Critics and media kept away from Gianni Infantino in Zurich. And no actual vote in FIFA's democracy. Just a stage-managed confirmation by acclamation. And one dissenting nation, Norway, only briefly acknowledged by FIFA.
These concerns relate to the bidding process being perceived as not fully aligning with the principles and objectives of FIFA's governance reforms of 2016.
United, we stand.
But they went ahead anyway. Saudi 2034 was lumped together with 2030 picks.
Uruguay, Argentina y Paraguay.
It needed 2 envelope reveals for this sprawling World Cup, concocted behind the scenes.
Morocco, Portugal and Spain.
No mention of climate concerns spreading the tournament across 3 continents.
Everyone gave up something for the benefit of all, for the greater good.
For the benefit of FIFA, maybe. But what about concerns in Saudi Arabia about human rights, conditions for migrant workers, building 15 stadiums, and discriminatory laws for women and the LGBTQ+ community? The FA did say it was assured by the Saudis everything would be fine for fans, and echoed their message the World Cup can be a catalyst for positive change. But human rights groups call this sports washing, using these mega events to detract from horrors like this. The murder of the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018. But his widow told Sky News she isn't opposed to the World Cup hosting.
That's very good what they're doing by getting a normal relation with the entire world regarding sport or economic or political deals. But in the same time, there is unfinished business here, which is Jamal Khashoggi case, is not completed.
Scrutiny on Saudi Arabia will intensify from the world, if not FIFA, after a day of celebrations. But there was no jeopardy. This was a coronation without a contest. Rob Harris, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor, Claire Ellicott. Welcome to both of you. With the Metro reporting that 10-year-old Sara Sharif's father showed no emotion as he was found guilty of a murder today. That and more after the break.
this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories tonight. A jury at the Old Bailey has found the father and stepmother of 10-year-old Sara Sharif guilty of her murder. The jury heard she was beaten, bitten and hooded in the lead-up to her death. A glimpse into the life of a dictator. Sky News has gone inside the Assad abandoned family home, where there were signs of a life of luxury, including evidence of millions stashed in foreign bank accounts. And hundreds of farmers and their tractors have driven through central London to urge the government to reconsider plans to introduce inheritance tax on agricultural land, saying food supplies could be threatened. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor, Claire Ellicott. Great to see both of you. Welcome. So let's take a look then at the front pages. And with the headline, "Not even a tear for Sara," the Metro reports that 10-year-old Sara Sharif's father showed no emotion as he was found guilty of her murder today. A quote on the front of the Express describes Sara as having been killed by the very adults who should have loved and protected her. The Daily Mail asks, why does this keep happening? As it reports authorities missed at least 15 chances to stop Sara's murder. Sara's story also on the front of the Daily Mirror, "The smile that hid a life of torture," the headline. Meanwhile, the government will cut more than 10,000 civil service jobs as departments battle to stay within spending limits, according to The Guardian. Amid proposed planning reforms spearheaded by the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, The Telegraph warns of a Labour bid to bulldoze the home counties. According to the Financial Times, the Qatari government is seeking to double its $500 billion sovereign wealth fund by doing deals with the British and American governments. And The Star, again, leans on boffins, this time to suggest that AI and chatbots will turn us all into zombies. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's head to Kevin and to Claire. Most newspapers, as we saw, Claire, dominated by the convictions today in the case of Sara Sharif, with the revelations truly shocking and so many questions now about what went wrong, given she was under a protective plan from before she was born.
This poor little girl, 10 years old, was murdered by her father and stepmother, and as the Mail has on its front page, they missed 15, the authorities missed 15 chances to save her. The trouble is, you will always have awful, horrible people in the world, but we have a system that's supposed to be there to protect children and to protect those who may end up their victims. And it's clear that there have been real failures in this case. There's a safeguarding review going on. There's loads of questions for Surrey Social Services, who are supposed to have protected this poor little girl. And we've seen the heartbreaking footage of her today playing her guitar. She's adorable, she's clearly spirited, she's got everything to live for. And her parents, her stepmother and her father, you know, you've also heard on Sky today the transcript of his conversation with the emergency services. And it's just heartbreaking. There were clearly signs that things were going wrong and a need for someone to intervene. And the fact that this hasn't happened leaves really, really big questions.
Absolutely. You know, under a protection plan from birth, taken into foster care more than once, given to her mother, given to her father, school raises questions, is homeschooled. Why is she allowed to be homeschooled when the school has already raised questions? These are the sort of questions that the Children's Commissioner has begun to ask and demand answers to, that there could be changes on elements of this.
No, absolutely, and then learn lessons to hopefully it won't happen again. But, of course, it has happened before, and sadly,
parents will kill children in the future. Most parents reading this, it's going to be absolutely horrified. We need to know the broad outline of what she suffered to understand the case, and it is absolutely horrific, and your heart sinks as you read it, and you look at that little girl who is now dead and being killed in the most brutal, horrific way by the people who should have loved her most and protected her most. But the family is a cornerstone of society, but some families shouldn't have children. And this emphasis to try and keep families together is sometimes wrong. She should have been taken away long ago because they were not fit parents. It's quite clear when you look through the case, and allowing them to keep her in the end resulted in her death. But all the lessons have to be learned. I mean, the courts, police, social services, and teachers. Why? You need to know, and then. It is learn those lessons to try and stop this happening.
Like again. Basic data sharing, for example.
Yeah.
Why was a case closed after the school raised it in less than a week when she was already listed as having been in care? I mean, this is really basic stuff at the end of the day, isn't it?
I think one of the most heartbreaking bits is that social services got her file in 2023, I think, and it was closed after 6 days. And this was a girl, there was some testimony from one of her friends saying she turned up at school covered in bruises and lied about falling off her bike. But even her young friends knew that wasn't true. And it feels, I think there were some reports that she wore a hijab to try to cover up some of her injuries. Some of the stuff we've seen reported during the court case, that she was bitten, that she was hooded, that she was tortured to death by these two people, is absolutely savage. And it's just really hard to think that, why wasn't someone from social services checking up on the family?
But what we do know is the courts, the police, social services and teachers' schools are all under enormous pressure.
Yes.
They've great resource pressure, pressure of time, pressure to deal with so much. That's not to excuse the mistakes that have clearly been made, but it is to try and explain them and understand them and how you can try and sort them so it doesn't happen again. Of course, something like this will happen again somewhere, but you want to minimise it.
Yes, and if each social worker has 40, 50, 60 cases, we were told that they should be prioritised. The question is, well, surely this was a priority. Sure. And then we were told, well, it's all relative. So how bad can it be elsewhere?
No, absolutely. You're right there. It's clearly it should be a priority, but how many other kids were like this in that area? And I suspect she's not going to be alone.
There were real echoes of the Baby P case, which was absolutely horrific, and social services made a lot of mistakes in that case, and we saw kind of the aftermath of that, them trying to defend some of their actions. And I think having a safeguarding review is really important to determine what went wrong and to try to stop it happening again. But Baby P wasn't that long ago, and it does feel like these things happen far too often.
Yes, many of the injuries that Sara suffered, the court heard, had been inflicted using implements, including a cricket bat, a vacuum, a metal pole, evidence of the restraint that you talked about, her head covered with homemade hoods made from parcel tape and plastic bags. While some of the injuries were while the injuries were inflicted, she would be in this plastic bag and tape. I mean, it's just terrible.
We've been discovering the extent of the inhumanity and the torture in Syria by Assad's regime, but here in Hampshire, people who are adults who are animals torturing a little girl. It's just absolutely horrific when it's happening in our own country.
Yes. Well, case review, no doubt, sentencing to come as well. I'm sure more will come out about this as well.
I would have thought throw away the key.
They are facing a lifetime behind bars.
Yeah. Let's move on to politics, I guess. Financial Times, a very dramatic photo among many of the tractors descending, Claire, once again into central London, to Westminster.
Yes, I'm based in Parliament, and we spent the whole day trying to work and listening to this noise outside, but it's clear these people are very impassioned. There's hundreds of tractors descended on Parliament Square today, and they were all beeping, doing go-slows around the square, and it was quite a convivial atmosphere. They do really believe what they're protesting against, which is the budget changes which means that farmers will be liable to inheritance tax above a certain level, and they accuse Labour of destroying their livelihoods and threatening family farms, which may now have to be broken up in order to pay inheritance tax bills that they now face. And this was their way of demonstrating against it. It's very colourful, it's very powerful, it's captured the nation's mood. People really know about this tax on farmers, and I think Labour are taking a lot of flack over it.
Yeah, I mean, not the first time, and not just in London, to be fair.
I question whether it's the nation's mood. Some of the nation, not the rest of the nation. I didn't go down, didn't pop in our House of Commons to see "Get Off My Land," as they might if I was with them. But can you imagine if that was just stop oil, rather than just stop soil? They would be they'd be demanding they be arrested. The people who are cheering them on, the MPs cheering them on, they say got to be arrested, got to be banned, can't bring London to a standstill like that. But that's a fantastic picture. But it is a political problem for the government. It's got to get its message across. How when they filled up their tractors with their subsidised red diesel and come into London like this to create traffic chaos, the fact that the deal they're getting on inheritance tax. Inheritance tax was there until Margaret Thatcher lifted it for farms and landowners in the mid-1980s. We actually had more of our food produced by British farmers when last time inheritance tax was levied, but their allowance is up to 3 times what most other people will get. The rate will only be half what other people will pay, and they'll get 10 years.
They're not listening to you, Kevin.
No. You've got to get it across, because you might not win them, because of course they've got a vested interest, entitles, privilege, whatever it is. They're fighting their corner. It's like other groups do. They're entitled to in a democracy. But you've got to get the message across to everybody else, because they don't speak for the entirety of even rural areas.
But the difficulty for Labour is, what is it, about 100 now of the constituencies they won are in rural areas. Yeah. You have a story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Labour bid to bulldoze the home counties, and down the bottom the Mac cartoon, if we've got it, while I was in London.
Fantastic.
The government built these houses on my land. But the point is that Labour is being accused of not liking a large part of our country that lives in rural or semi-rural areas.
Those people in those rural areas, farmers are a minority. I'm not sweeping them away.
But not for people in green belt areas that feel that their immediacy land is.
People in those rural areas will be using the health service, education, transport, relying on a criminal justice system, all those services which need improving. And if the inheritance tax on land, and including farmers, raises the $500 million that it's forecast to do, if it does, well, that will be money.
That is chicken feed compared to any large budget that we have in this country. That is the point they're making.
That will be $500 million's not chicken feed. If you've got $500 million to spend...
What is the NHS and social care budget for this country?
Yeah, it might be, 140, 150 billion, but $500 million spend a lot of money. For instance, if you were going to subsidise bus fares, if you had another $500 million, you could probably just about abolish them, never mind reduce them down to £2 from going up to £3.
It is about prioritising, and clearly they feel...
And there's a very small group who've had Mrs Thatcher... back in the 1980s, gave them a deal because she thought they'd be her supporters, and they're going to lose their special deal. But they'll get another special. They'll have a feather-bedded inheritance tax
Claire
system.
Talk about this next
Sorry, I thought she was going to lean forward and cut me out.
I think it's about time.
No one's putting the other case, is it? It's all farmers, great. But no one puts the other side. That's what's missing in this debate.
Apart from the entirety of the government, but apart from that,
they don't.
Still to come. So Chris Whitty, the government's chief medical officer, who became a household name, we all remember during the pandemic, thinks there should be a tax now on junk food. Back with that in a moment.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters. We love Trump! I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here. but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important. It's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Kevin Maguire and Claire Ellicott. To the Telegraph, Kevin, we go. Plans for, as they put it, a fat tax on junk food. This is the Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty.
Yeah, England's Chief Medical Officer, of course, became very famous, prominent during COVID, and he's looking at the obesity epidemic. And he's saying, look, the only way we can do it is to get people to eat healthier by taxing unhealthy foods, those heavy with fat and sugar. And it is it's a very good idea medically, but I always wonder, will a government want to be seen to be putting up the price of food when improving living standards, household disposable income is its big economic priority now after it's sort of sidelined the high sustained economic growth in the G7 because it's not going to be delivered.
Do they say what food, and if that would discriminate against certain groups, for example?
Yeah, well, it's probably poorer people, isn't it? Proposes an industry-wide levy on salt and sugar, category, rather like what's happened in soft drinks, where George Osborne came in with a sugar tax, which you always hope would raise nothing, because it was intended to change the behaviour of the drinks manufacturers, which it did some and it didn't others. But by saying don't do it because you'll hit poorer people hardest, well, that used to be the argument with don't ban smoking indoors because it tends to be poorer people who smoke. Well, you kind of save lives if you do intervene, or do we just let poorer people die?
Yeah, I mean, problem is you take, salt, sugar, fat out, it just tastes not as good, doesn't it? I always say I'm one of these people who put salt on ready meals to say should we move on? Do you mind? I apologise. To the Financial Times, which is a bit of a hand grenade talking point, to be fair. Bosses must be paid like footballers if the UK is to compete. This is somebody in the city of London.
As you've just pointed out, a billionaire financier saying that people who run companies should be paid more. I think there is an argument for this. There has been, after the financial crash, there was a real kind of backlash against bankers. There were calls for them not to get bonuses. But the reality is...
Get bonuses as shares.
Yes.
So they have to stay with the company and be responsible and...
Yes. And, some of those were well you know, targeted. But I think Rachel Reeves has actually said that some of it went too far and she's trying to raise some of it back. The reality is that these are highly competitive it's a highly competitive global industry. The City of London still makes up a large proportion of our GDP. And actually, do you need to incentivise good people by paying them lots of money to get them to do a good job? Yes, I think you probably do.
It doesn't need to speak, it's just his face.
I'm just...
We will ask you that next time as well. Anyway, lots more still to come. Thank you for now, both of you. Thank you. Here is the weather. So it's looking fairly settled this week, if chilly and cloudy for many, but northern parts will turn wet and windy over the weekend. A cool, rather murky start for most tomorrow. Hill fog, patchy drizzle in the east. Expect a sharp frost where skies are clear. Some dense fog in places as well. Scotland most at risk of that. Central and southern parts will see grey, damp conditions again, becoming more extensive tomorrow morning. And southern Scotland looks like clouding over. The bulk of Scotland will be quite sunny again, though. Northwest England, Western Wales and the northwest of Ireland can expect some sunny spells too. Well, our press preview continues in Sky News at 11. Questions now for social services after the father and stepmother of Sara Sharif are found guilty of her murder.